In the humid twilight of March 1983, Fort Lauderdale's exclusive marina district hummed with a particular kind of energy that only existed where serious money gathered. The intra-coastal waterway stretched like a liquid highway between towering condominiums and sprawling estates, its surface dotted with vessels that cost more than most people's homes. Here, among the forest of masts and gleaming superstructures, conversations were conducted in hushed tones about deals worth millions, partnerships that could reshape skylines, and investments that carried the power to transform entire neighborhoods. The marina itself had become a symbol of South Florida's explosive growth during the early 80s. Real estate values had skyrocketed as northern money poured into the region, drawn by favorable tax laws and year-round boating weather. Developers competed fiercely for waterfront parcels, and those who succeeded often celebrated their victories aboard floating palaces that served as both homes and business headquarters. On this particular evening, one yacht commanded attention even among its impressive neighbors. The Meridian stretched 110 feet along the private dock, her white hull unmarked by salt spray or weather stains. Custom Italian craftsmanship was evident in every detail, from the hand-polished brass fittings to the teak decking that had been sanded and refinished to mirror perfection. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. This wasn't merely a boat. It was a statement of arrival, a declaration that her owner had transcended ordinary success and entered the rarefied atmosphere where real power resided. Harrison Caldwell had purchased the Meridian 3 years earlier, following the completion of his largest development project to date. The 62-year-old real estate magnate understood that in his world, appearances mattered as much as balance sheets. Potential investors needed to see evidence of success before committing their own capital, and nothing demonstrated financial strength quite like a pristine yacht moored in prime marina space. Caldwell's journey to this level of wealth had been methodical rather than spectacular. Born into a middle-class family in Jacksonville, he had worked construction summers during college, learning the building trade from foundation to roofing. After graduation, he spent 5 years with established developers, absorbing the intricacies of zoning laws, financing structures, and political relationships that determined which projects succeeded and which became expensive failures. His breakthrough came in 1976 when he identified an undervalued stretch of Broward County coastline and convinced a group of investors to purchase the land for residential development. The project, a luxury condominium complex called Ocean's Edge, sold out before construction was completed. The success provided Caldwell with both capital and credibility for increasingly ambitious ventures. By 1983, Caldwell controlled a portfolio worth over $40 million, with projects spanning from Miami to West Palm Beach. He specialized in waterfront properties, understanding that Florida's appeal lay in its connection to the ocean. His developments featured private marinas, beach access, and architectural designs that maximized water views. Each project built upon the last, creating a reputation that attracted both investors and buyers who valued quality and exclusivity. The Meridian served as more than Caldwell's personal retreat. The yacht functioned as a floating conference room where he conducted his most sensitive business negotiations. The privacy afforded by marine isolation allowed for frank discussions about financing, partnerships, and political considerations that could never occur in traditional office settings. Regulatory officials, city planners, and influential investors found themselves more relaxed and candid when surrounded by ocean breezes and the gentle motion of the water. Caldwell's parties aboard the Meridian had become legendary throughout South Florida's business community. These gatherings combined social entertainment with serious deal-making, creating an atmosphere where million-dollar handshake agreements emerged from casual conversations. Guests understood that invitations to these events represented access to opportunities unavailable through conventional channels. The evening of March 15th had been planned for weeks. Caldwell intended to unveil his most ambitious project yet, a mixed-use development in Key Largo that would feature luxury condominiums, a boutique hotel, and a world-class marina. The project required unprecedented capital investment, approximately $12 million in initial funding, but promised returns that could double his net worth within 5 years. To demonstrate his commitment to the venture, Caldwell had taken an extraordinary step. Earlier that week, he had withdrawn $3.6 million in cash from multiple bank accounts, representing his personal investment in the project. The money, bundled in Federal Reserve wrappers and sealed in bank bags, was stored in the yacht's private safe as tangible proof of his financial backing. This display of liquid assets served multiple purposes in Caldwell's negotiation strategy. First, it demonstrated that he possessed genuine resources rather than relying entirely on borrowed capital. Second, the physical presence of cash created psychological impact on potential investors, making the opportunity seem more immediate and real. Third, it provided flexibility for quick decisions should negotiations progress faster than anticipated. The guest list for the evening reflected Caldwell's strategic approach to project financing. He had invited 12 serious investors, each capable of contributing between $500,000 and $2 million to the Key Largo development. These individuals represented diverse backgrounds, from established real estate families to successful entrepreneurs seeking portfolio diversification. All shared common characteristics: significant liquid assets, experience with large-scale investments, and reputations for discretion in business matters. Among the invited guests was Margaret Rothschild, heir to a pharmaceutical fortune, who had relocated to Florida following her husband's death 2 years earlier. She controlled a trust worth approximately $15 million and had expressed interest in real estate investments that could provide both income and appreciation. Her presence at the party signaled serious institutional interest in Caldwell's proposal. Also attending was Vincent Torino, a construction magnate from New Jersey who had recently expanded operations into Florida. Torino's company specialized in high-rise construction and had completed several prominent projects throughout the Southeast. His potential involvement would provide both capital and construction expertise, reducing project risks and timeline uncertainties. The evening's third major investor was David Chen, a Hong Kong businessman who had immigrated to the United States in 1979, with substantial assets derived from manufacturing operations. Chen sought investment opportunities that would establish his family's permanent presence in America, while generating returns comparable to his international business ventures. Waterfront real estate in growing markets like South Florida fit perfectly within his long-term strategy. As afternoon faded into evening, the Meridian's crew completed final preparations for the gathering. The yacht's interior had been configured for both intimate conversations and larger group presentations. The main salon featured comfortable seating arrangements that encouraged mingling, while the upper deck provided space for more casual interactions under the stars. Caldwell himself spent the afternoon reviewing financial projections and architectural renderings for the Key Largo project. Every detail had been carefully planned to maximize investor confidence and minimize perceived risks. Site surveys, environmental studies, and preliminary permits were already in place, demonstrating that the project was ready for immediate implementation pending funding approval. The catering arrangements reflected Caldwell's attention to detail and understanding of his guests' expectations. He had contracted with Prestige Events, an upscale catering company known for discretion and quality service at high-profile gatherings throughout Broward County. The company's reputation was built on their ability to provide elegant service while maintaining invisibility, allowing hosts and guests to conduct business without distraction. Prestige Events had assigned their most experienced team to the Meridian party. The six-person crew included seasoned professionals who understood the unique requirements of yacht-based entertaining. Each staff member had been screened for reliability and discretion, qualities essential when serving clients whose conversations often involved confidential business information. Among the catering staff was Isaiah Blake, a 35-year-old bartender whose reputation for professionalism had made him a preferred choice for Prestige Events' most exclusive assignments. Isaiah possessed the rare combination of technical skill and social awareness that allowed him to provide excellent service while remaining virtually invisible to guests. His ability to anticipate needs without intrusive attention had earned him regular assignments at the highest levels of South Florida society. Isaiah's background appeared unremarkable to those who employed his services. He lived quietly in a modest apartment complex west of downtown Fort Lauderdale, drove a well-maintained but aging Honda Civic, and supplemented his catering income with occasional shifts at established restaurants. His lifestyle reflected the financial reality of service industry work, comfortable but without excess or ostentation. What clients and employers didn't recognize was Isaiah's exceptional observational abilities. Years of bartending had developed his skill at reading people, understanding social dynamics, and noticing details that others missed. He could assess a room's mood within minutes, identify the most influential individuals in any gathering, and predict how conversations would develop based on body language and interaction patterns. These skills had served Isaiah well throughout his bartending career. He knew when to engage guests in conversation and when to remain silent, when to offer suggestions, and when to simply fulfill requests without comment. His reputation for discretion was genuine, built on a foundation of understanding that his continued employment depended on clients' comfort and confidence in his professionalism. However, Isaiah's observational abilities extended beyond social dynamics to encompass physical spaces and security arrangements. He automatically noted entry and exit points, identified valuable items and their locations, and assessed the effectiveness of protective measures in any environment he entered. This awareness had developed unconsciously over years of working in wealthy clients' homes and businesses, where valuable possessions were often displayed openly. As Isaiah prepared for the evening's assignment aboard the Meridian, he had no conscious plan beyond providing exceptional service to Caldwell's guests. His focus remained professional, centered on the technical requirements of managing bar service for 40 people in the confined space of a yacht's upper deck. The evening represented another routine assignment in a career built on such events. The transformation of Isaiah Blake from professional bartender to criminal would occur gradually throughout the evening, driven by observations and opportunities that revealed themselves as the party progressed. The combination of minimal security, intoxicated guests, and Caldwell's predictable patterns would create circumstances that Isaiah's analytical mind could not ignore. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the intracoastal waterway in shades of gold and crimson, the stage was set for an evening that would alter multiple lives forever. The Meridian waited at her berth like a beautiful trap, her elegant spaces concealing the potential for both tremendous opportunity and devastating loss. Within hours, $3.6 million would vanish into the Florida night, beginning a mystery that would remain unsolved for over 2 decades. The first guests would arrive shortly, their expensive cars pulling into the marina's valet area as uniformed attendants directed them toward the private dock. Among them walked individuals whose decisions that evening would ripple through time, creating consequences none of them could anticipate. The party was about to begin, and with it, one of the most perfectly executed thefts in South Florida history. The reunion between Maria Santos and Isaiah Blake unfolded with the casual familiarity of old colleagues reconnecting after years apart. Maria, now managing director of a prominent Orlando hotel, had been meeting with suppliers when she spotted the familiar figure at a corner table. Despite the passage of time and Isaiah's improved appearance, she recognized him immediately. His methodical way of arranging items on the table, the careful manner in which he observed his surroundings, even his posture while eating remained unchanged from their shared catering days. "Isaiah Blake, I can't believe it." Maria approached with genuine warmth. "It's been what, 20 years? You look fantastic." Isaiah's initial reaction was measured surprise. He stood politely, embracing Maria with the appropriate enthusiasm, while his mind rapidly processed the implications of this unexpected encounter. Maria Santos had been one of the more observant servers on the catering crew, someone who noticed details that others missed. Her memory had always been exceptional, a trait that made her valuable during complex events where client preferences and special requirements demanded attention. "Maria, what a wonderful surprise," Isaiah replied, gesturing toward an empty chair. "Please, join me. You look incredible. Hotel management suits you well." As Maria settled into her seat, she studied Isaiah with the analytical eye that had served her throughout her hospitality career. His clothing was well-tailored but not ostentatious. His watch expensive but understated. Everything about his appearance suggested success without displaying obvious wealth. The contrast with the struggling bartender she remembered was striking, but not immediately suspicious. "I heard through the grapevine that you left catering," Maria began, her tone conversational but probing. "Someone mentioned you went into food service on your own. That must have been quite a transition from those yacht parties and society events." Isaiah nodded, maintaining his composure while internally calculating how much information he should reveal. "I started with a food truck operation back in the late 80s. Nothing glamorous, just serving construction workers and office buildings. It grew from there into full catering services." "That's amazing," Maria responded, but her expression suggested she was processing more than Isaiah's words. "I remember how carefully you handled everything during those catering jobs. You always seemed to notice things that the rest of us missed. I guess that attention to detail served you well in business." The comment carried an undertone that made Isaiah slightly uncomfortable, though he couldn't identify exactly why. Maria's observation skills had been remarkable even decades earlier. She possessed the ability to track multiple conversations simultaneously while serving guests, remembering drink preferences and dietary restrictions without written notes. Her talent for observation had made her invaluable during high-pressure events. "The food service industry requires attention to detail," Isaiah replied carefully. "Customer preferences, timing, inventory management. It all builds on skills we developed during those catering years." Maria's smile remained pleasant, but her questions grew more specific. "I often think about some of those events we worked together, especially that yacht party in Fort Lauderdale. You remember? The one where all that money was stolen? That was such a crazy night. The police interviewed all of us afterward." Isaiah felt his pulse quicken, but maintained his relaxed demeanor. "That was definitely unusual. I remember the investigation lasting for weeks. They questioned everyone multiple times. You know what I found strange about that evening?" Maria continued, her voice maintaining its conversational tone while her eyes studied Isaiah's reactions. "You disappeared from the bar area for quite a while during the party. I noticed because I needed to get drinks for some guests on the upper deck, but you weren't at your station." The observation struck Isaiah like a physical blow, though he managed to keep his expression neutral. After 23 years, he had assumed that such specific details had been forgotten or dismissed as unimportant. Maria's memory was proving more dangerous than he had anticipated. "I probably went below to get supplies," Isaiah responded, though he realized immediately that the explanation sounded rehearsed. "Those yacht events always required multiple supply runs throughout the evening." "That's what I thought at the time," Maria nodded, but her tone suggested she had given the matter considerable thought since then. "But I remember asking the other staff about supplies, and they said everything was already stocked. I also noticed you seemed different after you came back, more nervous, checking your watch frequently." Isaiah's mind raced through possible responses that would deflect Maria's suspicions without appearing defensive. Her recollections were becoming increasingly specific and damaging. The casual reunion was transforming into something that resembled an interrogation. "Yacht events were always stressful," he offered. "Wealthy clients, expensive surroundings, pressure to provide perfect service. Everyone was nervous that night, especially after we learned about the theft." "Maybe," Maria replied, though her expression indicated she wasn't entirely convinced. "But you know what really stuck with me? During cleanup, you were handling the supply bags differently than usual. Instead of loading them directly onto the catering truck, you were moving them toward the parking area. I thought it was odd at the time." The conversation had moved beyond casual reminiscence into territory that threatened everything Isaiah had built over the past 2 decades. Maria's memory was not just clear, it was focused on precisely the details that could connect him to the crime. Her observations suggested she had been unconsciously collecting evidence for years. "I honestly don't remember the specific cleanup procedures from that night," Isaiah said, attempting to sound casual while steering the conversation away from dangerous ground. "It was such a chaotic evening with all the police activity and investigation. Everyone was confused about normal procedures." Maria studied him for a long moment before speaking again. "Isaiah, I'm going to ask you something directly, and I hope you'll be honest with me. Did you take that money from Harrison Caldwell's yacht?" The question hung between them like an accusation that could no longer be avoided or deflected. Isaiah realized that his carefully maintained facade was crumbling under the weight of Maria's persistent memory and analytical mind. The woman across from him had spent 23 years in the hospitality industry, developing skills in reading people and detecting inconsistencies that rivaled those of trained investigators. "Maria, I can't believe you would ask such a question," Isaiah replied, but his protest lacked conviction. "We worked together for months. You know my character. I know the character of the struggling bartender I worked with in 1983, Maria responded firmly. "But looking at you now, seeing how you've transformed your life, I'm wondering if there's more to the story than hard work and business success." Isaiah felt the weight of 23 years of deception pressing down on him. The perfect crime that had seemed so secure was unraveling through the memory of someone he had barely considered a threat. Maria's observations had been filed away in her mind like evidence in a case file, waiting for the right moment to emerge. "I built my business through legitimate means," Isaiah insisted, though his voice had lost its earlier confidence. "The food truck operation, catering contracts, real estate investments, everything was documented and legal." "I'm sure it was," Maria agreed. "But where did the initial capital come from? Food trucks cost money, catering equipment requires investment, real estate purchases need down payments. You were earning bartender wages when we worked together. Even with tips and overtime, that doesn't provide the kind of startup capital needed for successful business ventures." Her analysis was methodical and devastating. Maria had clearly spent considerable time thinking about Isaiah's transformation and identifying the inconsistencies that didn't align with his supposed background. Her questions demonstrated an understanding of business finance that made her observations even more credible. Isaiah realized that his options were rapidly disappearing. He could continue denying Maria's suspicions, but her memory and analytical abilities made her a formidable opponent. She possessed specific details about the night of the theft that could provide investigators with leads they had never pursued. Her recollections could reopen a case that had remained dormant for over 2 decades. Maria, even if what you're suggesting were true, the statute of limitations would protect anyone involved, Isaiah said, inadvertently revealing more than he intended. Maybe, Maria replied, but I don't think Harrison Caldwell ever got over losing that money. It destroyed several of his business deals and damaged his reputation with investors. He deserves to know the truth, even if legal prosecution isn't possible. The mention of Caldwell's suffering added an emotional dimension to the conversation that Isaiah had not anticipated. He had focused so completely on avoiding detection that he had never fully considered the impact of his crime on the victim. The $3.6 million represented more than money to Caldwell. It had been the foundation for business ventures that never materialized and opportunities that were lost forever. I understand your concern for justice, Isaiah said carefully, but accusations without proof can be just as damaging as the original crime. You're right, Maria acknowledged. That's why I'm giving you the opportunity to tell me the truth directly. If you were involved, I think you owe it to Harrison Caldwell to admit what happened. He spent over 20 years wondering how someone managed to steal that money without leaving any trace. Isaiah found himself at a crossroads that would determine the remainder of his life. He could maintain his denials and hope that Maria would abandon her suspicions, or he could acknowledge the truth and attempt to control how the information was revealed. Either choice carried enormous risks, but continuing to lie seemed increasingly futile given Maria's determination and detailed memories. The lunch conversation that had begun as a pleasant reunion between former colleagues was transforming into a confession that would expose a perfect crime and destroy a carefully constructed life. Isaiah Blake, the patient bartender who had successfully hidden his secret for 23 years, was about to discover that some truths cannot remain buried forever. The encounter between Maria Santos and Isaiah Blake would prove to be the unraveling thread that pulled apart 23 years of carefully maintained deception. As their conversation continued in that Orlando restaurant, Isaiah found himself trapped between maintaining his fabricated narrative and confronting the growing realization that his former colleague possessed dangerously specific memories from that night in 1983. Maria's questions grew more pointed as she studied Isaiah's reactions. Her years in hotel management had refined her ability to read people, to detect the subtle inconsistencies that revealed when someone was being less than truthful. The skills that made her successful in hospitality were now being applied to uncover a truth that Isaiah had spent over 2 decades concealing. You know what else I remember about that night? Maria continued, her voice maintaining its conversational tone while her eyes never left Isaiah's face. After the police arrived and we were all being questioned, you seemed remarkably calm. Most of us were nervous, upset about being involved in such a serious crime scene. But you appeared almost relieved, like you had been expecting something to happen. Isaiah felt sweat forming on his forehead despite the restaurant's air conditioning. Each of Maria's observations struck with surgical precision, targeting details he had assumed were forgotten or insignificant. Her memory was proving to be a forensic instrument more dangerous than any technology available to the original investigators. I think everyone handles stress differently, Isaiah replied, attempting to sound casual while internally calculating how much damage Maria's recollections could cause. Some people get emotional, others withdraw. I've always been more reserved during difficult situations. Maybe, Maria acknowledged. though her expression suggested she wasn't convinced. But there was something else that stuck with me. During the cleanup, when we were loading equipment back onto the trucks, you made several trips to the parking area that seemed unnecessary. I thought it was odd because you were carrying supply bags that should have gone directly to the catering vehicle. The specificity of Maria's memory was breathtaking. Isaiah realized that she had been unconsciously cataloging his movements throughout that evening, creating a mental record that had remained intact for over 2 decades. Her observations were more detailed than those of the trained investigators who had questioned the catering staff. I honestly don't remember the specific cleanup procedures from that night, Isaiah said, though his voice had lost much of its earlier confidence. It was such a chaotic situation with all the police activity. Everyone was confused about normal protocols. Maria leaned forward slightly, her demeanor shifting from nostalgic conversation to something more purposeful. Isaiah, I need to ask you something directly, and I hope you'll give me an honest answer. That money that was stolen from Harrison Caldwell's yacht, did you take it? The question hung in the air between them like an accusation that could no longer be avoided. Isaiah felt the weight of 23 years of deception pressing down on him. The careful facade he had maintained was crumbling under the persistence of someone whose memory had preserved evidence he thought was lost forever. Maria, I can't believe you would ask such a thing, Isaiah protested, though his denial lacked the conviction it would have carried years earlier. We worked together. You knew me then. Does that seem like something I would do? I knew the struggling bartender who worked catering jobs to pay rent, Maria replied firmly. But looking at you now, seeing how successful you've become, I'm wondering if there's more to your story than you've told me. Where did the capital come from to start your food truck business? How did you afford to expand into catering and real estate when you were earning server wages 23 years ago? Her analysis was methodical and devastating. Maria had clearly spent considerable time thinking about Isaiah's transformation, identifying the financial inconsistencies that didn't align with his supposed background. Her questions demonstrated an understanding of business economics that made her observations even more credible. Isaiah realized that his options were rapidly disappearing. He could continue denying Maria's suspicions, but her memory and analytical abilities made her a formidable opponent. She possessed specific details about the night of the theft that could provide investigators with leads they had never pursued. Even if what you're suggesting were true, Isaiah said carefully, the statute of limitations would protect anyone involved. This conversation is purely academic at this point. Maybe legally, Maria replied. But Harrison Caldwell never recovered from that theft. It destroyed several business deals and damaged his reputation with investors. He deserves to know what happened, even if prosecution isn't possible anymore. The mention of Caldwell's suffering added an emotional dimension that Isaiah had not anticipated. He had focused so completely on avoiding detection that he had never fully considered the lasting impact of his crime on the victim. The $3.6 million had represented more than money to Caldwell. It had been the foundation for business ventures that never materialized. I understand your concern for justice, Isaiah said, though his composure was clearly deteriorating. But accusations without proof can be just as damaging as the original crime. You're right about needing proof, Maria acknowledged. That's why I'm giving you the opportunity to tell me the truth. If you were involved, I think you owe it to Harrison Caldwell to finally admit what happened. He spent over 20 years wondering how someone managed to steal that money without leaving any evidence. Isaiah found himself at a crossroads that would determine the remainder of his life. He could maintain his denials and hope that Maria would abandon her suspicions, or he could acknowledge the truth and attempt to control how the information was revealed. Either choice carried enormous risks, The restaurant continued its normal lunch service around them, but Isaiah felt isolated in a bubble of tension that separated him from the ordinary world he had inhabited for so long. His carefully constructed identity as a legitimate businessman was dissolving under the weight of Maria's persistent questioning. "What would you do if I told you that you were right?" Isaiah asked quietly, his voice barely audible above the restaurant's ambient noise. What would be the point of confirming something that happened so long ago? Maria studied his face intently before responding. "I would want to understand how it happened, how someone I worked with, someone who seemed honest and reliable, could execute such a sophisticated theft. And I would want to know what you did with the money." The question revealed that Maria's interest extended beyond simple justice. She was genuinely curious about the mechanics of the crime, and how Isaiah had managed to avoid detection for so long. Her inquiry had the quality of someone trying to solve a puzzle that had intrigued her for years. Isaiah felt a strange sense of relief beginning to emerge alongside his fear. The burden of maintaining his secret had grown heavier over the years, even as his success had increased. The isolation required to protect his false identity had prevented him from forming meaningful relationships or fully enjoying the wealth he had accumulated. "If I were to admit to something like this," Isaiah said slowly, "what assurance would I have that the information would remain between us?" Maria's response carried a finality that Isaiah had been dreading. "I can't make any promises about keeping this secret," she said quietly. "Harrison Caldwell deserves to know what happened to his money, and the authorities deserve to close this case properly." Isaiah sat in stunned silence, watching his carefully constructed world crumble around him. The restaurant's lunch crowd continued their conversations, oblivious to the confession unfolding at the corner table. After 23 years of perfect deception, a chance encounter with a former colleague had exposed the truth that no investigation had been able to uncover. Within days of their meeting, Maria contacted the Fort Lauderdale Police Department. Her detailed statement provided investigators with the breakthrough they had never expected to receive. The case that had remained cold for over 2 decades was suddenly very much alive again. Isaiah's transformation from struggling bartender to successful businessman finally made sense when viewed through the lens of a $3.6 million theft. The arrest came quietly, without drama or media attention. Isaiah Blake, now 58 years old and a respected member of his community, was taken into custody at his office on a Thursday morning. The food truck empire he had built, the real estate investments he had made, the legitimate life he had created. All of it would be scrutinized and dismantled as investigators traced the path of stolen money through decades of careful laundering. For Harrison Caldwell, now in his 80s, the news brought a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. The money was long gone, spent and invested over the course of more than 2 decades. But the mystery that had haunted him for so many years finally had an answer. The bartender who had served drinks to his guests that night had been the one who destroyed his business dreams and shattered his trust in human nature. Isaiah's story became a cautionary tale, whispered in law enforcement circles and business communities throughout South Florida. No crime is perfect, no secret is permanent, and no amount of time can guarantee that the truth will remain buried. Sometimes justice arrives not through brilliant detective work or advanced forensics, but through the simple power of human memory and the courage to speak the truth.